do. Thank you, Shah. So yes, this webinar will be recorded today. However, just the panel section of the webinar will be recorded. So the three speakers. When we get to the Q&A towards the end of the webinar, we will stop the recording just to make sure that people can ask questions comfortably. The first part of the panel that is recorded will be available on our YouTube afterwards as well. So I'll share that link with everyone who's attended today. So once again, we're using webinar mode. We won't be able to see or hear you. So please feel free to use the chat function for questions or any comments. Once we will have the opportunity for questions at the end. However, the panelists will be keeping an eye on that chat as well. And if they're able, they'll try and answer them live to give us lots of time and lots of questions to be asked. So without further ado, just like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. So Farmers for Climate Action acknowledges the traditional owners of the land on which we work and the traditional owners of the land our guests and speakers are all joining us from today. We pay our respects to elders past and present. I am joining from beautiful Kamilaroi land in Gunnedah, New South Wales. It is wonderful to see so many people from all over Australia joining us, and you're most welcome to share where you're joining from in the chat as well. So again, thank you for joining our webinar, which is around what happens when renewables approach the end of life. And thanks again to Realliance for their partnership on this. Shah, if we could click to the next slide, thank you. Wonderful. So Farmers for Climate Action really is Australia's only farmer-led charitable organisation, cross-commodity, that advocates for ambitious climate action both on and off the farm. And I'll get you to check to the next slide too. Thank you, Shah. So Farmers for Climate Action, as I said, we've got over 8,500 or nearly 8,500 farmer members across Australia, but we also have more than 80,000 community supporters who are all advocating and supporting us in our mission for strong climate action that puts farmers and farming communities as a priority group. So we're independent, non-profit and non-partisan. And we have just celebrated our 10-year anniversary with our summit down in Canberra. So hopefully a few of you were able to see us there. But yes, we're looking forward to another 10 years of strong climate action. And next slide, thanks, Shah. So Farmers for Climate Action, our vision is that farmers and our representatives are climate leaders across Australia and even in the global space. So our mission is to influence Australia to adopt strong economy-wide climate policies, which is full of opportunity for farmers and farming communities. So we are strong believers that the more people within those networks, our farmers and our community supporters, we're able to influence governments to implement smart climate policies that mitigate climate change and benefit rural communities across Australia. We continue to advocate for what we call the 4 Ps, so climate action that ensures Australian farmers are profitable, productive, and take care of both our people and the planet. We're a member of the National Farmers Federation and a member of the Climate Action Network Australia, which highlights our unique position as Australia's only national cross-commodity, climate-focused agricultural representative group. And just on the screen there, you can see our 4 main goals, which underpins all the work that we do. So without further ado, I will introduce our first speaker, so Andrew Bray from Realliance. Andrew has been the National Director of Realliance since 2013, including the period until 2019 when the organisation operated as the Australian Wind Alliance. In that time, Andrew has built the organisation to become the leading voice advocating for regional communities in issues around the energy transition, especially transmission, community benefit sharing, and addressing impacts on local communities. Andrew has been a member of AEMO's Advisory Council on the Social Licence, and in 2021 was awarded the Clean Energy Council's Outstanding Contribution to Industry Award for his long-standing work in these areas. Andrew is also an adjunct research fellow at the Gulbali Research Institute, based out of Charles Sturt University. He is based in one of New South Wales' prime wind districts, the Southern Tablelands, and is passionate about the contribution renewable energy can make to rural and regional economies while helping Australia transition to a cleaner future. So we are very, very excited to have and privileged to have Andrew joining us today. And I will pass over to Andrew for the introductory panel session. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Georgia, and hi, everybody. Yes, as she said, I'm Andrew Bray, I'm the National Director at RE Alliance. I was lucky enough to be at the Farmers for Climate Action Summit last month in Canberra. It was a wonderful event. A lot to celebrate in 10 years of great work. So yeah, I'm delighted to be able to present this work in your webinar today. So thank you. I'm dialing in from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country in Bungendore in regional New South Wales. For those of you who haven't come across us before, RE Alliance is a not independent, not-for-profit. We've been working in regional communities for more than a decade, where large-scale renewable development is being built or proposed. Our vision is of a responsible and rapid shift to clean energy, but crucially one that actively contributes to the strength and resilience of our regions. And also noting that if the transition isn't contributing in the regions the way that it's meant to, it's going to make the transition much slower because regional communities will not see themselves as partners. Next slide, please. What we're here to talk through today is a new resource that we recently published, a toolkit for landholders and regional communities, exploring what happens when renewable energy assets such as wind farms, solar farms, and large-scale battery projects begin to approach the age of retirement. So I'm pleased that my colleague Megan Kessler is here on the call, and I'd also like to acknowledge Bridget Ryan, who's our outgoing Policy and Research Director, who played a key role in putting this together. So if you have any questions about the recyclability of renewables, the age of renewables, or who deals with the cost when renewables reach end of life, this toolkit has you covered. Crucially, it also has questions that landholders can ask of developers and where they can get advice. So we really did try to make this as useful a document as we could. Next slide. So why did we create this toolkit? It's intended to address a big information gap, pardon me, across many communities who are hosting or potentially host renewable energy projects in their region. We created it for three reasons. Because decommissioning and issues related to that, like financial assurance and recycling, they keep coming up in just about every one of our conversations in the regions in recent times. Secondly, there are growing stories in the region about landholders who are considering hosting renewables, but decided against this due to concerns about decommissioning. And thirdly, because information around end of life or retirement of renewables that's specific to Australia was either hard to find or it was written for industry audiences and not really something that the community could make much use of. The toolkit was developed from a major report that we produced that included recommendations to government and industry about what they can be doing to ensure that retirement renewables is done well. So why are we having the conversation around retirement of renewables now? Because we're at quite a crucial point. Next slide, please. We've had 8 projects decommissioned or repowered in Australia so far. These ones have been in remote and island regions, mainly in West Australia, Queensland, and Tasmania. And the first of the old grid-connected wind projects to be fully decommissioned will happen in the next year or so, starting with the Codrington wind farm in southwest Victoria. And to date, these have been done very successfully. There hasn't been an example in Australia of a project where decommissioning hasn't worked. Um, we can do this right, but it's crucial that we have the conversation now about how we do it right in the future. Next slide. So over the next 10 years, around 1 gigawatt of projects will reach retirement age. But over the next decade after that, it will be around 12.5 gigawatts. So the amount will grow. But to put these numbers in perspective, in April this year, we had 26 gigawatts of rooftop solar installed across the country. So this is the bar on the left-hand side, and just a bit more, 27.5 gigawatts of large-scale wind and solar. So that's the amount that we have installed right now. And you can see that the amounts that will be decommissioned, which are the purple bars after that, um, is quite modest, actually. But nevertheless, it's a significant amount of work that has to be done. So currently more than 40% of our national electricity market is already powered by renewable sources. And being springtime, where it gets a bit higher, last week it was 56%. So it's kind of extraordinary the extent to which renewables are now making up our total electricity supply. Um, so it's crucial that the appropriate systems are in place to do this now, and that's part of what our major report addresses. There's a framework of action for industry and government in that report. But the main point I guess I'd like to emphasise now is that we do have time to get this right. Next slide. So there are different options at retirement age, 3 different options, and it's not just decommissioning and done. So when a wind, solar, or battery project reaches the end of its projected life, there are 3 possible paths forward, and 2 of these options actually extend the project's life rather than ending it completely. By refurbishment, we mean replacing worn components with newer parts to keep the project going. Repowering means completely replacing all the equipment on an existing site with newer, more efficient technology. And both of those options, refurbishing and repowering, mean longer life for the project and therefore longer ongoing income generation for landholders and benefit sharing for communities. But if the project's generally done its dash and run its course, decommissioning is the dismantling and removing of all equipment and then rehabilitating the site as it has been agreed with the landholder. Next slide. So it's worth noting that renewable technologies, wind, solar, and battery, are all highly recyclable. So more than 90% of wind turbines can be recycled. If you think about the amount of steel and mechanics, simple mechanical sort of machinery, sorry, I've got the terminology right. All of that stuff, you could take it down to Sims Metal today and they could recycle it straight away. So there's 90% of that can be recycled. Nearly all the components of solar panels can be recycled, and up to 95% of battery storage is recyclable as well. And people are generally surprised by this because it's one of those things that floats around on the internet. But when you actually look into what's possible and how this can work, the amounts are quite high. But one of the challenges is that we currently only have about 17% of household solar panels and 10% of lithium-ion batteries that are actually being recycled in Australia. So that's an important point to make. First, we have to make sure that we have the capacity in the right locations to deliver this recycling work. And by advancing recycling technologies and increasing industry and government cooperation, we can maximise the reuse of recycling across the renewable energy sector. There's quite a lot of work being done in this space already, so we can expect that significant improvements will happen into the future. But the key point of this is that a lot of that work still has to be done. And so sitting here in 2025, we need to make sure that we're pushing on the right levers to make sure that that capacity is being built up and that we're ready for the decommissioning when it requires, when it's required. Next slide, please. This is another thing that sometimes people are surprised about, given what they see on social media, but the life expectancy of renewable projects obviously varies by technology. But interestingly, Australia's oldest larger wind farms are lasting much longer than expected. So they were originally built to run for around 20 years, but many are now on track to run for 30 to 40 years. Large-scale solar sits at around the 20 to 25-year mark. Offshore wind, 25 to 40 years, and big battery storage at more than 20 years. So there's quite a lot of life in these projects. And as I mentioned before, with refurbishment and potentially repowering, they can go on for much longer again. Next slide. This was a point that's again one that often comes up in discussion, and that's around the issue of what we've called financial assurance. So who bears the final cost of decommissioning wind, solar and battery projects? Very common question and a very real concern for farmers, as it should be. But the answer is almost always the project developer. Crucially, we've not found any examples in Australia where the landholder has had to bear that cost. Many new renewable energy projects now include some form of financial assurance to cover the cost of decommissioning, with the obligations clearly applying to the project owner, although older projects may not have these safeguards built in. But certainly in a few moments, you'll hear from Tom about his experience of this, his project. So when I say financial assurance, the sort of things we're talking about here are things like decommissioning bonds, parent company guarantees, bank guarantees or letters of credit, and insurance products. We've got much more detailed information on these in the toolkit, but just to introduce them now. But we've also pulled together a series of questions in that toolkit for landholders to ask around what these instruments are going to be, to make sure that farmers are satisfied with the agreement they're entering into. The toolkit itself is available on the Realliance website, and we can provide you with some print files for this A5 as well. It's actually a very attractive little booklet, which is very hard to show on these kind of things, but it looks a bit like that. So I'd really encourage you to have a look at it if you're interested. We want this to be something that can answer your questions and that you can refer to if you're engaged on a renewable energy project. So that's enough for me. Thank you very much, Georgia.
Thanks so much, Andrew. That was some really great information. I do have one quick question, if I could slide it in before we actually go to Q&A, is you mentioned that some of the wind farms are actually living much longer than their initial predicted lifespan. Is there a particular reason for that? Did we just underestimate their lifespan to begin with?
Yeah, I think that probably is it. I mean, I think when they're put up, they come with essentially warranties like you might get with any kind of product, and those warranties go for, the original ones were around 20 years, but wind turbines now are essentially coming with warranties for 30 years of operation. So you're sort of seeing it creep up in the warranties that, that's the kind of project length that manufacturers are willing to stand behind.
Yeah, great. No, it's a nice bonus, I suppose, to all of it. So that's great. Thank you. We'll now move on to our second speaker. So Tom Gunthorpe, who you can see the photos of his farm there. So Tom is a dedicated second-generation farmer with a profound commitment to renewable energy and sustainability. He has spent over 25 years in the fields of electronics, software and IT in Sydney and internationally. Since the year 2000, he has expanded his family business to create a critical mass enterprise focused on self-replacing fine wool and black Angus beef. And Tom made the decision to return to the family farm in 2015. He hosts wind turbines on his property as part of the Bango Wind Farm and has navigated the extensive 10-year lead time from initial contract negotiations through to construction and ongoing operation. Today, Tom's farms are drought-proofed, providing a reliable passive income for potentially the next 70 years, which fosters intergenerational wealth and security for his family, which I think is something that everyone who's on the land here today can appreciate is an amazing thing to have. His journey embodies the harmonious integration of traditional farming and innovative renewable energy solutions. Tom is really eager to continue his involvement in this work, and he supports others who are going through their renewables journey. And just speaking to Tom yesterday briefly, I know we are so lucky to have him sharing his story here today. So I will welcome Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for inviting me to talk. I'm just going to go through my experience with the whole process of having the turbines installed. As noted, this was a long, drawn-out process. When I first acquired the property where the turbines are, it came with a very basic license for the companies to prospect the opportunity of putting a wind farm up. And it was some years before we actually got going. This is through the Tony Abbott years, where it was very difficult to get any of these projects through. But once we finally got through that process, we put a group of landholders together. And essentially, it's like a group of 4 elected landholders out of a group of 9 step forward to represent the group. Now, importantly, we decided that we were to stick together as a group so that there was no conquer and divide. We'd all end up with essentially the same contract so that there's no differences between neighbouring properties. And then we were able to negotiate a stronger outcome by doing that. Now, just looking back, when we first started, we were offered 2 different layouts of number of turbines and the turbine rating. Now, interesting enough, and I suppose one favour that Tony Abbott did for us is that by the time we got through, the size of these turbines doubled. So during that time, we were going from a 2.5 megawatt turbine with an option for a 3.4, but we installed 5.3 megawatt turbines. Neighbouring projects now are larger again. Rye Park at 6.2, and the proposed new projects up around 8 megawatts now. So this is just happening in a very, very short period of time. Addressing one of the things that Andrew mentioned earlier about the term of these projects, our contracts are 25 plus 25 plus 25-year terms. So potentially up to a 75-year term. We're 5 years in now. So decommissioning for us, that's a good question. When's that going to happen? But I would highly expect that we'd be repowering these along the way. Now, I can't take claim for all the things that we put together. We had a very smart group of landholders that negotiated our deal. And we basically ended up with 3 documents. A license and option agreement, which is all the legals around, responsibilities of landholder and tenant. We had a code of conduct document that was predominantly aimed at what happened during construction, the rules around what they can do, what they can't do. And there's a lot of things I could talk to with that, not being the focus of today's comment though. So, and then what is important though is that we negotiated, we call it decommissioning fund, but it's really an escrow fund. Now, that fund is designed to begin at about the 10-year period. And the reason for that is it was just financially equitable for the host to do that, not the host, the owners. And then we put funds aside per turbine per year for the life of the project up until the point when the end of life of the project comes to bear. Interesting enough, I was just reading through the contracts this morning, and it actually says that if they have not removed their equipment after 12 months of completion, the farmers get to own it. So would I want to own a turbine? Probably. Don't know. If we could repower them ourselves, it'd be pretty lucrative. But nonetheless, the escrow fund is designed to pay for that decommissioning process. And even if the turbine company don't do their task, we can draw on those funds to get that work done. Now, that's a fairly broad overview of what happened. There's many other aspects to the negotiation we could bring forward. I might just put it forward to any questions at the moment around any part of that process.
I'll keep monitoring the chat for you, Tom. In the meantime, I do have a couple of questions that were sort of pre-submitted. I might just ask you one and then we can jump to some other questions later on. What was the real, I mean, there's, you know, some comments about drought proofing and things, but what really made you go, we need to do this? This is the time to do it, I suppose.
Well, it really wasn't our choice. You know, these things turned up, and you know, in fact, I remember going back to 2006. We were smack bang in the worst year of the millennial drought, and we were scratching ourselves looking for other things we could do to bring in farm income. And you know, you get a knock on the door of a wind farm wanting to offer this sort of financial income. You know, it's pretty hard to turn it down, albeit it was another 10 years or 15 years before it came forward. But I've been through the droughts, and it's devastating. So having that peace of mind, it's fabulous.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. There's a few questions now coming through in the chat, Tom. So what I'll do is I'll give you time to read through those, and I might pass them to you in the actual Q&A section of the session as well, unless you want to answer any of them right now.
I can see them on the screen. There's one there around how much. Look, that's a lot of our agreements are confidential, so we won't talk about numbers per se, but there's a formula that's set up to manage that, and everything's CPI adjusted, so it's managed for the future.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. So I'll give you some time to read through those other ones, Tom, but I will pass over to our third speaker, Charlie Prell. And thank you again, Tom. The questions that are coming through, your knowledge and experience is just amazing to have on the panel. So over to Charlie Prell. So Charlie Prell is a retired farmer, and he's actually the previous chair of Farmers for Climate Action. Charlie was previously the New South Wales regional organiser for Australian Wind Alliance, which is now Realliance, and he has played a key role in promoting the benefits that wind farms can bring to regional communities. Charlie's been a very strong advocate for comprehensive benefit sharing for over 15 years, and we're very, very lucky to have Charlie in our networks and sharing his time with us today. So Charlie, I'll pass to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgia. I'm assuming you can hear me okay. Good. Listen, I'm really pleased to be here as part of this seminar, but I just want to paint a bit of a picture about paint the context of this discussion that we're having. There's no doubt in my mind that decommissioning, or I prefer to call it repowering, most wind farms, as Andrew alluded to, are repowered, not decommissioned. Some of the older ones were. So it's a really important issue. And at the end of the day, legally, the landholder is responsible for the state of that land, whether it's blackberries or serrated tussock or wind turbines. The landholder is responsible for the upkeep of that land. But in that context, there's, as Andrew said, there's no hurry about this. There is a need to make sure that long-term agreements like the one I've signed and Tom signed, by the sound of it, do take account of the long-term liability of the end-of-life program for the wind farm, and solar farms are exactly the same. But I just want to paint a picture for you. The coal industry in Australia, which is what we're up against, the vast majority, actually it's just flipped, but the majority of electricity in Australia has always been, until recently, very recently, last month, been generated, the majority of it's been generated by coal. There's no such thing as clean coal. That lump of coal that Scott Morrison took into Parliament had to be lacquered, otherwise he would have had black hands. But worse than that, when you burn coal, I'm old enough to remember cleaning out the coal stoves in the school that I went to in Crookwell. Coal leaves a lot of ash behind when you burn it. There are mountains of coal ash, particularly through the Hunter Valley and the Latrobe Valley, that there is no remediation plan for. That doesn't mean that the renewable energy industry needs to walk down that path. I think the circularity of potential for wind turbines, particularly solar panels as well, and batteries, as Andrew said, is virtually 100%. So, and Australians, unfortunately, have a long history of being pretty lackadaisical and lazy about recycling things, circular economies. So we need to set, I think there's all of those things that I've just talked about paint a picture for me of the renewable industry, wind, solar and batteries, setting a standard of recycling and circularity, circular economy that we can use as an example of this clean energy industry that we're in. And then maybe other sections of the society, like plastic bottles are spring to everyone's mind, plastic bags, obviously, soft plastic bags. Maybe there'll be some more dedicated action towards those things. I think Tom's comments about having a clause in your, or a condition in your agreement with your host, the host of the leaseholder that's leasing your land to build solar panels or wind turbines, is a really, really strong move. I don't have that in my agreement, but I did have a stipulation from the New South Wales Department of Planning, which is current, that the wind turbine company that I was in partnership with is responsible for the make good of the land. And that is working in conjunction with the owner of the land. It's not me anymore, but the person that bought my farm. So that's a really important thing. I'll just finish on one final point. There's an image that springs into people's minds, particularly of wind turbines. The image that everybody knows about of a really badly sited wind farm in America that killed lots of migratory birds. That is really, really, really uncommon, virtually unique. The other image in relation to what we're talking about here, end of life, is the rusting hulks of small, really small wind turbines across the vast interior of America. And that is also really, really uncommon. In Australia, wind turbines, as Tom said, wind turbines have become very large, and they're 95%, I think Andrew said, is recyclable. All of the steel is 100% recyclable. The blades are more and more becoming reusable. There is a company setting up a little boutique shop to make surfboards from wind turbine blades. So it's just a matter of having the will and the motivation to do something better than the coal industry are doing, and then to enact those ideas into the renewable industry. I'll leave it at that and look forward to answering questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Your experience is invaluable. And again, yes, the questions that are coming through have just been really, really interesting. So I'll just, for the sake of the recording, I'll thank everyone who's watching this in the future on our YouTube, but we are going to stop the recording now just for some Q&A. So Charlene, if you could just switch that recording off, that would be wonderful, and we'll move to some questions.